Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Ridding. For those who don't know me, I consider myself to be a self-educated student at law. I do not go to school for this. I literally am trying to teach myself law as best as I can with the resources at my disposal. I typically, when I do these videos, they're typically from the perspective of Ontario, Canada. However, sometimes there is overlap to federal jurisdiction, meaning all of Canada, not just the territorial jurisdiction of Ontario. I always encourage people, I'm not giving legal advice. Please don't construe or apply any of this as legal advice. I always encourage people to validate the information for yourself. I will always share my resources when I can, and or seek out a qualified legal professional to verify the information that I'm sharing here today. So I do apologize. It's been a while since I've done a video, and in part, I've been working with a lot of people right now, doing some research with them to try and help them find the laws and or rules that need to be applied in their matters, including Reopening of Ontario Act. Now, I've come across some really good stuff lately, and I want to get the information out there. I'm going to try and explain to you how I sourced it out, how I found it, and share the links and try and explain as best as I can on what it means. So to begin, I have a friend, and I didn't know her when she went to trial back in January. I think I just met her, but I was just getting going, if you will, as far as my getting out there and trying to assist people. And so she went to the Ontario Court of Justice under the Provincial Offences Act for a ticket under the Reopening of Ontario Act, and she was tried and convicted. Flash forward today, we're working through the appeal right now, hopefully hoping to have that in at the beginning of next week. That's what we're working on right now. But as I was digging through the rules, I realized just how many rules have been violated. And I cannot stress this enough. I just cannot stress this enough. The rules, people, the rules rule. Case law doesn't rule. Okay, building a case on case law is ridiculous, because a rule in law, in other words, the section under the act is the rule that supersedes any case law, and I cannot stress that enough. I proved this recently in court with Rule 136. Also known as Section 136 of the Courts of Justice Act with respect to recording, as well as rule, and it's off the top of my head, I'm going from memory here. I want to say it's Rule 36 under the Provincial Offences Act, motion to quash versus the absence of the rule for motion to dismiss. And you got to remember that anyone who's before a court right now, the provincial offenses court or criminal court, they're there because they contravened a rule or a section. They will call it a section, but in reality, those sections are in fact rules. They're rules of law. So if you, as an example, are on the highway and you were pulled over for speeding and you're given a ticket under section 128, blah, 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 blah. Good morning. then you contravened that rule of speeding. They call it a section. It's actually a rule. And it's because you contravened that rule, you broke the rule, and now you're before the Ontario Court of Justice under the Provincial Offences Act. I've been digging up some stuff there too, but that's another video for another time. Let's focus on the Reopening of Ontario Act and what my friend is faced with. So one of the first things that it occurred to me, and I've talked about jurisdiction before, and as I'm digging through hers, I'm like, what is the jurisdiction of the court? It's such a simple question nobody asks, and I'm digging through it and I'm going, what is the jurisdiction of the court? Now, why would I ask a question like that? Well, I'm going to explain to you, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen, because you guys don't need to look at me. It's far more fun to share the screen and show you what I see. So I think, yep, there we go. If I've done this correctly, you now see what is in front of us is the Dog Owner Liability Act. Okay, this is a Ontario provincial statute, Dog Owner Liability Act. It's an Ontario provincial statute for people who own dogs, and if that dog does something. Now, I want to point out, and this is also kind of important, I want to point out that the Provincial Offences Act is considered quasi-criminal. It's considered anyone who's in the Ontario Court of Justice under the Provincial Offences Act, they're there because they did something that's considered, you know, slightly criminal in nature. Okay, which means also, because law has two natures. It's either civil or criminal. So if it's quasi-criminal, it's also quasi-civil. But I'm not going to get into the quasi-civil at the moment. Let's focus on the fact that it's quasi-criminal. If it's wholly criminal, then you're in the criminal court, which is the Superior Court of Ontario, or the Superior Court of Justice. So if you're charged under the criminal code, you're going to be in the Superior Court of Justice. Now, they do have a rule, and I'll explain, they have a rule in the criminal code that if you, because there's two types of violations in the criminal code. You have an indictable offense, which is more serious, and you have a summary offense, and that may bring you back to the Ontario Court of Justice, but I don't want to get into that today. I just want to acknowledge it. Going back, Provincial Offences Act, any charge under the Provincial Offences Act is in the Ontario Court of Justice, and you're in the Ontario Court of Justice under the Provincial Offences Act, specifically, not the Criminal Code of Canada, but the Provincial Offences Act, because it's considered to be slightly criminal in nature. It's a penal offense without it being a serious penal offense. So Dog Owner Liability Act, if you have an animal that has bitten or attacked someone, or has behaved in a manner that possesses a menace to the safety of persons, or yada, 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 okay, then under the Dog Liability Act, proceedings under Part 9 of the Provincial Offences Act, it's written into the Dog Owner Liability Act, okay? So there's actually 20 rules under the Dog Owner Liability Act, but there's only 2 rules. You have proceedings, Part 9 of the Provincial Offences Act right here. And those proceedings, Part 9 of the Provincial Offences Act, apply to Rule 4 and Rule 5. So if someone has contravened either one of these rules, then they can be charged under the Provincial Offences Act pursuant to these rules and brought before the Ontario Court of Justice for a penal offense, hence quasi-criminal. All right. Very, very clear and straightforward. I'm going to switch the screen share, because now I want to, and I've got to, just before I do, I got to open up some other windows. So I want to start with the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. So now that we know how another statute in Ontario can be applied to the Provincial Offences Act, I started to think about the jurisdiction of the court. What is the jurisdiction of these? So, you know, I'm gonna have to stop share. There we go. I am technologically challenged. There we go. Now I can find it. All right. So what I've got here, I've got open the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Now, the version that I have downloaded on my computer is the historical version period for July 1st, 2019 through to April 13th, 2022. Why did I download that version? Because my friend was charged for an occurrence of an alleged offense on April the 8th, 2021. So we need to make sure that we're using the right Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Now, I've downloaded this off of the website because, and the reason why is because I was looking specifically for information. Now, how did I find the information I was looking for? I wanted to know what would the authority of the, like what court had jurisdiction and who had jurisdiction to make an order. Was it a justice, which could be a judge or justice of the peace, or was it a judge? Now, I've got another nugget coming up about justice of the peace, but that's going to be for another day. I've just gone into my find feature on my Word, and in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see I typed in the word, the letters JU, and I'm going to hit the arrow, and you can see that it brings me through to words, and there's not a lot that have JU in it, but it brought me here because, and I use JU because, again, I want to get the words justice. I want to get the words judge. I want to get the words jurisdiction. Those are the words I'm looking for. They all have JU, and I was just trying to get it done. So the powers, so now we're in the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act for the date that applies to April 8th, 2021. And it shows what the powers of the Premier is. The powers delegated to the Premier, which I've got highlighted at the top left-hand corner here. Below that, you have the powers of Premier and the municipal powers, which are below that. And then further down, you have proceedings to restrain the contravention of order. Okay, so proceedings to restrain contravention of order. So upon application, it says, it starts out here, and I don't have 100% of this highlighted, but upon application, right there, okay, it talks about who can put in an application, and upon that application, the judge may make the order, and it may be enforced in the same manner as any other order or judgment of the Superior Court of Justice. Superior Court of Justice, folks. So if you are given an order, or if there's an order by the Premier or the municipal powers, and you contravene it, all right, the court that has jurisdiction here is the Superior Court of Justice, not the Ontario Court of Justice, the Superior Court of Justice. And this is why I'm saying to people, it's time to stop substituting words. We substitute words, we change the nature of the character. So I needed to know, are we in the Ontario Court of Justice or are we in the Superior Court of Justice? Now, if you're contravening a public order, that is a penal offense as I understand it. I'm going to qualify it. As I understand it, it's a penal offense. This isn't about monetary damage. This is about a potential offense against our fellow citizen, hence penal. If you contravene an order of the Premier, they have to take it to a Superior Court of Justice to get it enforced. The only people in this country that have the authority to enforce any order is a court, is a judge. That judge gets their authority under Part 7 of the Constitution Act of 1867. And they are under, and it's acknowledged in the Constitution Act of 1867, and it's acknowledged under Rule 71 of the Courts of Justice Act, that the judiciary is a separate branch of government. I repeat, the judiciary is a separate branch of government. The legislatures, they can create legislation, but they don't have the authority to enforce legislation ever. That's why we have courts. It is for the court to determine whether or not the legislation was broken. And only the court has the authority to enforce. So under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, while the Premier or the municipalities can create, quote, regulations, which are orders, and I use the term orders loosely, they don't have the authority to enforce those orders. So if you contravene an order under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, the court that has jurisdiction is the Superior Court of Justice. What does that mean? It means the Ontario Court of Justice doesn't have jurisdiction. It says here, and the judge may make the order. A justice of the peace who does not necessarily have at least 10 years standing at the bar under the Judges Act is not a judge. They are not a judge, and therefore a justice of the peace does not have the authority to enforce the order, the regulation that you're contravening. Now you can be fined, but again, the fine here has to be pursued in what court? Superior Court of Justice. Superior Court of Justice is the only court of justice named in the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. And let me prove it to you. I've already shown you using the JU. I'm going to keep going through my arrows, and you can see it highlighting here, judgment of the Superior Court of Justice. And now we're back to words there. Oh, I'm just going to go back there for a second. Requires the payment of fees in respect to in the administration of justice. Again, no other jurisdiction, court of jurisdiction has been found. Now, I will qualify this by adding one more thing. If there's damages, like let's say you contravene an order and harm is caused and there's a price tag attached to that harm. This is where the quasi-criminal nature comes in. The quasi-civil nature comes in. If you contravene the order and there's financial damages, if the financial damages are under $35,000, then it goes to a court of competent jurisdiction, which would be the small claims court. If the financial damages are in excess of $35,000, you go to a court of competent jurisdiction, and that takes you to the Superior Court of Ontario. But now you're into civil court, hence the quasi-civil nature of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. So I wanted to address that because it does talk about the court of competent jurisdiction, but it's where there are financial costs that need to be regained. So they can't pursue financial damages in a penal court, which is criminal and or quasi-criminal, being the Provincial Offences Act. And if there's financial damages, they have to go to the civil, they have to go to the quasi-civil nature of court, and they have to go to the civil side. So that's the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Now so what happens from there is, it wasn't the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act that my friend was charged under. She was charged under the Reopening of Ontario Act. Now, what a lot of people don't necessarily understand about the Reopening of Ontario Act is that the Reopening of Ontario Act was actually originally a regulation. It was originally a regulation under the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act, which the Ford government then turned around and they made it its own act. But it actually works under the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act because it speaks to continuing 7.0.2 order, that 7.0.2 order coming from the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. I know this is a lot of information, folks, but I believe it or not, I'm still talking about the same subject, and that is this ticket my friend got. So my friend received a ticket under, of all things, offenses. So she was charged with Reopening of Ontario Act contravening 10.1. 10.1 says every person who fails to comply with subsection 9.1, subsection 9.1, subsection 2, or subsection 9.1, subsection 3, or with a continued section 7.0.2 order, or who interferes with or obstructs any person in the exercise of a power or performance of duty conferred by such an order is guilty of an offense. What has she been charged with? I have no idea. She could have been charged with a 9.1 subsection 2, a 9.1 subsection 3, or 7.0.2 order. They have failed to properly specify what the hell she was charged with. Okay, because that's a whole lot of things. And if there's no order, she wasn't given an order. Okay, so what order specifically did she violate? Now we're into the doctrine of vagueness because it's unclear. And furthermore, under the Provincial Offenses Act, there's a rule called Rule 35. And if they fail to adequately identify what you've been charged with, then they have to prove that everything. So in this case, they have to prove that she did all of this, not just part of it. She had to prove that she did all of it. Well, God, what is all of it? We don't even know. But that's that again, I actually am getting a little off topic. So let's go back to the subject. That's what she was charged with. So once again, using the find feature in the upper right-hand corner here, I typed in the word JU. I wanted to see if the Ontario Court of Justice or the Provincial Offences Act applied, because they used the Reopening of Ontario Act and they applied it under the Provincial Offences Act. Now, if you recall, I already showed you the Owner Liability Act. It acknowledges if you do something if you break Rule 4 or 5 in the Dog Owner Liability Act, then they can take you to the Provincial Offences Act for a penal violation. Otherwise, you're here. So otherwise it's, so what's the jurisdiction of the Reopening of Ontario Act? So I typed in JU. I'm going to go to the beginning here, just so you can see the search that I did, and I'm looking for judge, justice, or jurisdiction. Those are the words that I'm looking for. So I've typed in the word JU, and poof, it brings us right to enforcement. Well, rule number 9, that's a number 9 here, folks, right there. Rule number 9, proceedings to restrain contravention of order. The contravention, and I'm just going to go right to the highlighted section, the contravention by any person of a contained section 7.0.2 order may be restrained by order of a judge of the Superior Court of Justice upon application, and the judge may make the order, and it may be enforced in the same manner as any other order or judgment of the Superior Court of Justice. Bingo. This is a penal matter for the Superior Court of Justice. This isn't about fining people obscene amounts of money. This is about enforcing the order, and the only one who has the authority to enforce it is the judge, which falls under Part 7 of the Constitution Act and Rule 71 of the Courts of Justice Act. And the Superior Court of Justice is a superior court, and the Ontario Court of Justice is an inferior court. The Ontario Court of Justice, folks, is not named in this act any more than it's named in the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. Neither act have the Ontario Court of Justice named. Also, neither act have the Provincial Offenses Act named. Let's keep going through this act for a second, because I want you to see this. So I'm going through, we see judge, Superior Court of Justice, the judgment of the Superior Court, Superior Court of Justice. It's all flipping through. That's it. That's it. There's nowhere else in this act. It just keeps circling me around and around in this one rule. The Reopening of Ontario Act, as best as I can determine under the rules, has, if it doesn't say in here, the justice may, if it doesn't say, and the justice may make the order, and it may be enforced in the same manner or order of judgment of the Ontario Court of Justice, then the justice does not have any authority. If it's not in there, if it's not expressly written that the Ontario Court of Justice and the Justice of the Peace has authority, then they don't have the authority to do any of this. They don't have the authority to hear a Reopening of Ontario Act ticket. Now let's take it a step further, because as I continue to dig through my friend's case, she was charged of an occurrence of an alleged offense on April the 8th of 2021. They amended the summons on April the 14th. And when they amended the summons, the date of the alleged offense is still April the 8th, but they had the public health officer for Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Charles Gardner. They had him write an order, and Charles Gardner, best as I can tell, and I'm just going to switch my screens up here again. He, oh, Jiminy Cricket, here we go. He exceeded his authority. Okay, he exceeded his authority. And how did he exceed his authority? Well, I'm going to show you. As soon as I can figure it. Oh, there we go. All right, so now I am taking up the Health Promotion and Protection Act. And this again is a historical, because they keep playing with the rules. They keep playing with these acts. So I've taken the historical version that applies to the date April 8th, 2021. So using the words JU, once again, I went through this act, and the only authority, so he wrote an order under Rule 22. Now, Rule 22, I'm just going to, sorry, my bad. I have not actually opened up the entire act because yeah, I highlighted all these pages in advance. So Rule 22, he's allowed to write an order if he thinks that something's supposed to be done. Now, Ontario Court of Justice, this is the only reference, and it's on page 20 of the Health Promotion and Protection Act. The only authority the Ontario Court of Justice has under the Health Promotion and Protection Act is upon application by a medical officer of health, a judge of the Ontario Court of Justice. Bam, stop right there. A judge of the Ontario Court of Justice means that we are actually in the criminal court, okay, under summary conviction. Because the justice of the peace would be, if it said justice, it would apply, it would, under the definitions, it would apply to a judge or justice of the peace. But if it says judge, it means only a judge. Justice of the peace doesn't apply. So now we know that we are in summary convictions of the Criminal Court of Canada under the in the Ontario Court of Justice. So a judge of the Ontario Court of Justice in the circumstances specified in subsection 2 may make an order specified in subsection 3. So I'm going to just unhighlight that because I want you to focus on what comes next. Because I mean, this just honestly, it's so simple, and it's so simple and straightforward. So if the medical officer puts in an application with the Ontario Court of Justice, a judge can make an order under subsection for the reasons in subsection 2, he can make an order in subsection 3. So what reasons can the medical officer of health put an application into the Ontario Court of Justice? Well, a medical officer of health under subsection 2 can apply under application for an order to be made where a person has failed to comply with an order by a medical officer of health in respect to a communicable disease that is a virulent disease. So these are the reasons, folks. Charles Gardner in Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, he can make an application to a judge in the Superior Court of Justice if he believes that if someone is contravening an order from him to isolate himself, A, or B, if that person is contravening an order from him that they have to submit themselves for an examination by a physician, or C, if that person is violating his order to have that person put themselves under the care of a physician. So Charles Gardner, this is all Charles Gardner can apply to an Ontario Court of Justice for, and the Ontario Court of Justice he's in by definition of judge is the summary conviction court of the inferior court of the Criminal Court of Canada. Or D, that the person conduct himself or herself in such a manner as to not expose another person to infection. So whatever order he wrote on April the 14th, if that order is contravened and he wants to take it to the Ontario Court of Justice, he has to do it under application, and he's got to go to the inferior court, criminal court of the Ontario Court of Justice to seek an order from a judge, because only a judge can issue and enforce an order, folks. Now, the contents of the order, and let me just clear some of this again, because I want you to focus on. So those are the reasons he can apply to a judge. What can a judge do? What can a judge do? Contents of order. A judge in an order under this section, the judge may order. So if it's expressed, this is what a judge can do. If it's not written, expressly written, then the judge can't do it. The judge may order that the person who has failed to comply with the order of the medical officer, the judge may order that person to be taken into custody and admitted to and detained in a hospital. The judge may order the person to be examined by a physician, or the judge may order the person, if found by on examination to be infected with an agent of a virulent disease, be treated for the disease. That's it. If you go and if you're ordered to a doctor and the doctor says, you're healthy, that's it. They can't do anything else. And it's over. Okay. So that is the authority of the Ontario Court of Justice. Now, what happens? And I'm just, let's switch screens here. So if you contravene the orders, where does everything else go? If you contravene the orders and they want to do a penalty, well, application of the judge where there's risk to health. Order of the judge at the Superior Court of Justice. We're back into the Superior Court of Justice. And again, the way this is being applied, folks, it's penal, which means it's either criminal or quasi-criminal. And therefore, we are in, and because there's no mention of the Provincial Offences Act in the Health Promotion and Prevention Protection Act, and there's no mention of the Ontario Court of Justice under being presided over by a justice, which would include a justice of the peace, the Ontario Court of Justice has no authority, period. A justice of the peace has no authority under the Health Promotion Protection Act. A justice of the peace has no authority over the Reopening of Ontario Act, and a justice of the peace has no authority under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. It's as simple as that. So looking at this and going through this, this is page 38 of the Health Promotion and Protection Act. Again, we're in the jurisdiction. The only court that has jurisdiction over this is the Superior Court of Justice. Okay, go to page 39. It continues. The only people who have authority, only person who has authority and or court who has jurisdiction is a judge in the Superior Court of Justice. Let me go to page 40. Again, if they want to appropriate your private property, they have to do it with your consent. And if they think it's imperative that they use your property to stage emergency measures, and you don't give them consent, then again, they got to go to a Superior Court of Justice and they got to talk to a judge, someone who's got at least 10 years standing at the bar. Now we go on to enforcement. Here it is, Part 9, enforcement. Does it say anything there about the Provincial Offences Act? No. Any person who fails to obey an order made under this act is guilty of an offense. Any person, and then that's Rule 100. Rule 100, subsection 3, any person who contravenes section 16, 17, 18, 18.1, 20, 39. It spells out what rules, just like the Owner Liability Act did. It tells you what rules can be applied, okay? And if you've contravened any of those rules, then you are guilty for an offense, okay? And where does all this go? It goes to the Superior Court of Justice. That's it. So I'm just scanning through this here. Nowhere does it give authority. Here we go. This is Rule 102. So Rule 100 talks about what rules apply. It talks about the enforcement of which rules apply. And now if you want to do a proceeding to restrain contravention of order, the contravention of any person of an order made under this act may be restrained by an order of the judge by the Superior Court of Justice. So once again, you're either in criminal court or you're in or you're in the inferior criminal court of the Ontario Court of Justice for summary conviction. Proceedings to prohibit continuation or repetition of contravention. So where any provision of this act or the regulations is contravened, may apply to a judge of the Superior Court of Justice for an order prohibiting the continuation or repetition of the contravention of carrying on or any activity specified requiring the person committing. So again, I'm not going to go through it all. And then enforcement, where a judge has made an order based on the application under subsection 2, the order may be enforced in the same manner as any other judgment of the Superior Court of Justice. So again, the only person who has authority is a judge, never a justice of the peace. And the only court that has jurisdiction is the Superior Court of Ontario, whether it be the inferior summary conviction court of the Ontario Court of Justice or the Superior Court being the Superior Court of Ontario. And not so they can restrain you, and then according to the fines, they can also apply the fines to you, but a justice of the peace can't. So understanding all this, Reopening of Ontario Act was applied under the Provincial Offences Act. Provincial Offences Act has no jurisdiction or authority over the Reopening of Ontario Act. The Justice of the Peace has no jurisdiction or authority over the Reopening of Ontario Act. And the Ontario Court of Justice has no jurisdiction or authority over the Reopening of Ontario Act. So 100%, this has all been misapplied. 100% it's all been misapplied. And I really, in summary, this is about understanding who has the jurisdiction to issue a decision over you, to preside over you, and what court has the authority to hear it. On the criminal side, you have quasi-criminal, which would be potentially the Provincial Offences Act, which, on the civil side would be small claims court, and on the and then on the criminal side, you have the Superior Court of Justice, and on the civil side, it would be the Superior Court of Justice. Again, there are two natures here, and it's understanding these two different natures. I know this is a lot of information, and the reality is, it was all pertaining to one subject. Everyone needs to take a look at what they've been charged under. Every act that is named or mentioned in those charges, you need to look at them. And when you look at them, don't just look at what you've been charged with. Find out, take a look, who has the authority to preside over you, and what court are you supposed to be in? Because that's a huge thing that I discovered here. None of these acts have any there's Ontario Court of Justice and a Justice of the Peace has absolutely no authority over any of these acts. None. So I hope this information helps. I'm probably going to try and get some more videos out in the next few weeks, because I still need to do more. If you like these videos, please like, subscribe, and share. I just want to get the information out there. And I want to also end, and I think I've got it open here. If not, let me just take a look. I want to end today by quoting Dr. Graves. Dr. Graves, for those of you who don't know, he is a lawyer. I'm not sure if he's still practicing or not, but he is or was a practicing lawyer in Florida. And I've never met him personally, but I have been using his course as well to help me refine some of the stuff that I am learning and honing my skills on. I pulled this right out of his course. So I'm quoting him from his course. Never assume a judge must or will do what's right. A good judge may wish to do what's right, but it's up to you to give your judge a legal opportunity to interfere and help you stop corruption by knowing what the law says, knowing, and I got a spelling mistake in there, knowing what the rules of the court say, filing the proper pleadings, using your evidence discovery tools wisely, moving the court for orders the law requires it to enter. Again, you go to the rules, you find those rules that are expressly written, you use those rules to move the court, and then you need to make sure you object. Justice is sometimes elusive simply because most people and many lawyers have no idea how easy it is to secure. You can get justice, but it requires work and courage, and it requires knowledge, but the knowledge is easy to learn. The rules rule. And I cannot stress this enough. The rules, folks, rule, not case law. And if you're stuck on case law and you're only reading case law, you're going to lose. Force your judge to enforce the rules. Stop your opponent from cheating. Erase judicial mistakes. That's a direct quote from, well, I've removed some of it, but that is a quote from Dr. Graves on howtowinincourt.com. I'm going to put his link into my description. If you want to look it up, look him up. I'm actually going to put in 2 links. If you decide you want to buy the course, you can use either link, but if you want me to get a little bit of a kickback out of it, use the second link, because one link gives me a kickback, one link doesn't. It's not that I'm trying to push his course. It's just that if, I'm making these videos as fast as I can, but the reality is that with all the work that I'm doing for other people right now, I'm not getting them out fast enough. And if you're looking and anxious to get some real direction on jurisprudence, I'm going to say jurisprudence, I strongly recommend Dr. Graves' course, because it will help you better understand jurisprudence, jurisprudence being the universal science of law. Yep. He's using different rules in Florida, but he will do the same thing I'm doing, show you how to look up the rules, how to understand the rules, how to apply the rules to ensure that jurisdiction is established and all that other good stuff. Thank you very much. Again, if you like these videos, like, subscribe, and share, and help me do what I can to get the information out there as quickly as we can. Take care.